Thank you, Steve, for the introduction there. Well, this is such an incredible group of women and men, I see. It is such an honor and privilege to be here and speaking at the 29th Annual Professional Businesswomen Conference of California. And I look out into the crowd, and I see so many amazing, empowered, and important people in this room. That's what it is all about, which is empowering each other, supporting each other, and lifting each other up. And so in that spirit, I thought that before I begin this session, it would be really cool if we could just turn to our neighbors and repeat after me. I am empowered.
I am empowered.
I can make a difference.
I can make a difference.
And age or title is not a factor of that.
Age or title is not a factor of that.
Okay, there's a lot of positive energy going on. Really feeding off of that. But today is also a very special day because it is my 10th month anniversary of beginning my first job out of college. And I know what you're all thinking, 10 months? What could you possibly have to teach me about the work world, those of you who've had decade-long careers and experience? Well, yes, I'm pretty sure that my area of expertise is in the field of expertise at this point in time. But I fully embrace that. I fully acknowledge that I have so much room to grow and learn from all of you and develop as an adult. But just because I am young, and just because I might have less experience than some of my counterparts, does not mean that I don't have a voice. So we as young people are conditioned to stay in our lanes, to put our heads down and grind and produce a work output. And that's somewhat a rite of passage in corporate America, sort of the rules we live by. But it's also a very narrow way of thinking about your role. I believe that instead, we as young people need to begin to assume the same level of accountability and responsibility that is expected of senior leaders. Because there's simply too much at stake in corporate America at this point in time for us to sit back and take an idle role. I think about this really unique moment in which I've emerged into the workforce. And this moment has been characterized by endless exposés into the toxic culture that is rampant in our organizations across the country, from sexual harassment to instances of gender and racial inequality. Unilever actually just produced a study across 9,000 people in 8 different global markets that found that 64% of women feel as though men do not call out other men in instances of bad behavior. And those women feel as though they are just pressured to put up with it, to move on. See, if we are not training ourselves to stand up now, we're not going to be preparing ourselves to stand up in the future. And that's what I want to talk to you all about today. How to become an advocate for change in the workplace and how to drive a culture of inclusion that is accepting of all people. Now, this topic is very personal to me because at a young age, even younger than I am now, I'm 23, I was exposed to the harsh realities of what it means to navigate corporate America, not only as a woman, but also as a person of color. But what I learned from that experience was 2 very important lessons. And the first lesson is, it doesn't matter how well you're performing or how well you're perceived in an organization. Ultimately, if you're not in a place that supports your identity or that values you for your differences, not in spite of your differences, then you're going to have a very limited chance of success at that place. And second of all, if you allow those toxic people and that toxic culture to eat away at your definition of self-worth and value, then you're going to be even worse off. So I look back on that experience now, and I think I'm grateful for it, because I had to go through it. I had to be exposed to the harsh realities of what's out there. And I think about where I am now, and I work at LinkedIn, a place where I feel empowered to use my voice and to speak out. I feel as though I have an equal seat at the table. And I work on an all-male team right now, and that team is made up of some of the most smart and progressive and brilliant men that I've ever met. And I feel empowered to use my voice for change. And I'll tell you a brief little story of how I've begun to do that. Are you guys all familiar with the book Growtopia, written by Emily Chang?
Yes.
So this is a book that basically underlines gender disparities that exist in Silicon Valley. And they didn't know they were part of my little experiment at the time, but we were on our way to Lake Tahoe for a company offsite, and I brought the book along with me and I had it on my lap. And they all turned to me and they said, "Caroline, what is that you're reading?" And I said, "Well, since you asked." This is a book about gender inequality and tech, and it basically launched us into this really meaningful discussion about how men, and all of you men that I see here today, can become allies for women in the workplace, and how you can become a part of the conversation, not just the object of the conversation. So these are just meaningful ways in which I've begun to use my voice to make a difference. So with that, the goal of today is for you all to be inspired to act, to learn something, and hopefully act differently when you get back to your organizations. And today we're going to answer two important questions. And the first question is, what does driving change in our organizations and a culture of inclusion actually mean? And the second question is, how do we implement that change throughout our organizations? So let's begin to answer the first question on what change means. Well, change in societies is inextricably linked to change in organizations. It's impossible to talk about cultural change today without talking about how cultural change is being implemented on a societal level. And why is that? Because work and life have become increasingly integrated through the advent of technology and social media, which have created just a culture of interconnectedness and higher transparency and visibility around what's going on within our organizations and what's going on throughout the world. An example of this is Starbucks. So Starbucks is closing down 8,000 of its locations soon to conduct racial bias and sensitivity training. Why? Because there was a social media upheaval that erupted when two black men were arrested wrongfully in one of the locations in Philadelphia. And this was because they were perceived to be threats to the cabinet. So we can see here how events that are happening in society are making changes to policy within organizations. So why do we want to use the social change that's happening in the world as a proxy or a model for the social change that we want to make in our organizations? Because the social change that's happening now will shape the values and the ideals of the generations in the future. And those are the generations that are going to be filling talent pipelines and leadership roles. So, let's take a look at the current cultural values and ideals of this generation to understand what we want out of it. So if you look at this current cultural moment, it's defined by speaking truth to power, by holding organizations accountable for their actions, like Starbucks. This cultural moment is defined through social movements that have been very effective in prompting national dialogues that have shifted cultural perceptions of people and organizations globally. About the generation, it tells us about their values. This generation values equality. It values gender equality, racial equality. We want equal protection under the law, opportunity, inclusion, and safety. But if we examine social movements on a fundamental level, on a humanistic level, we can understand that all social movements are striving for one thing, and that is identity affirmation. Everyone wants to feel a sense of belonging. Everyone wants to feel as though their identity is valued and it matters in the community. These two social movements are using their platform as an opportunity to say who I am matters, it is important, and it belongs in my community. And this is not separate from what we want in the workplace. Human beings don't stop being human once they enter the office. I mean, I've only been here 10 months, so I'm not exactly sure. I can't confirm, don't hold me to that. But I'm pretty sure that's the case, and that's supported by data. So if we can go about starting to make change, but ultimately change is going to look very different for all of us, depending upon which environment we're in and what initiative we have to bring to the table. But the most important thing to remember, and the key takeaways for today, is that change starts with you. It's an attitude and it's a mindset. So if there's anything I would like for you to take out of this presentation, it's these core values. Value yourself and always be self-affirming. This is what I had to learn coming out of that experience. Acknowledge your own biases and how your own biases impact other people. Open yourself and your heart and your mind and your ears to change, or to just listening to someone else's opinion who might be different from yours, because that is always an opportunity to learn. Value those differences. Move outside the familiar. Surround yourself with people who are different from you. And lastly, embrace your own personal growth. Don't shy away from your weaknesses or areas that you think you need to work on. Be introspective and inward looking, because you will inspire others to do the same. So ultimately, again, change is a mindset. It's an attitude. We need to be aware of the world around us and where we stand in relation to it. We must have an impulse to stand up and stand out, to speak and speak out. Because only when we disrupt the status quo and make space where space previously did not exist, do we become useful to our generation and the future. And with that, I'd like to close and open it up for questions and answers. I believe there are 2 microphones here in front. Any of you guys?